Well, it's been a hot minute since we looked at Satisfactory. In fact, it's really only because it's now available on Steam that I kind of fell back into playing it. Popped up in front of me and I thought, wait, I already own that. Wonder how it's doing. The quick summary is that this is a factory-making game, which might not sound all that exciting in the grand scheme of things, but to actually play is a real gem. You are an employee of a company called Fix-It Inc., dropped quite literally on a planet and tasked with removing its resources for the good of the corporation. Initially using hand tools to pluck or hammer the things that you need, but automating the process wherever possible to scale up the efficiency and speed with which you can combine those resources to create other items, which in turn you combine with other items, and so on. To look at someone else's factory after they've been making it for a while is to often peek into what looks like pure madness, a nest of conveyor belts riddled with machines that pump and belch their repetitive work. It does kind of misrepresent how well the game does introduce these concepts to you, though, as a new player. You aren't thrown into the deep end and expected to construct complicated things. Everything is introduced gradually through gated unlocks. The complexity kind of sneaks up on you over time. You've learned almost without realizing, and then all of a sudden you stand back and look at what you've made, and how to others it probably looks incredibly difficult to follow, but to you, you remember every stage in its growth. In short, it's surprisingly approachable, really well paced, and thoroughly enjoyable to do. Satisfactory also has genuine charm, and offers features something that car manufacturers like to call surprise and delight. That hidden feature or detail that, although it's not directly needed, shows how much they care and how much attention has gone into even the smaller things in the game. To that end, I'm not going to list them all here. I'm going to try and avoid them in the footage as well. Players deserve to discover those on their own. But one of the more obvious elements of this concept are the animations, and they really do make the game sing. You might just stop and watch one of, say, the mining drills. Something that in so many games might just be a simple looped animation of a drill raising and lowering while spinning. But watch for a few more moments and you see that it looks almost like a mini oil rig drill. The secondary animations of lengths of drill stems are picked up from the side and then are seemingly fed into the top, above the current stem to give the idea that the machine is reaching deeper and deeper into the ground. The more you observe all of these machines, the more you see these little details. The rockets taking off from the base or the astonishing setup of the space elevator are done with obvious care and a clear joy for making the world feel as special as possible. The areas, or biomes as the game calls them, are also beautifully done. These aren't procedurally made, as you might imagine for these days, but instead are handcrafted and give the game a more kind of structured and sort of logical feel as you move around. And although the world isn't procedural, it does also feel pretty vast to play on. 30 square kilometers if the wiki is to be believed, and I've certainly not bumped into the edges much at all. It all feels like a huge alien world. You do pick from 4 initial starting locations: grasslands, rocky desert, northern forest, and dune desert, each with its strengths and weaknesses. These are all part of the larger game map though, and you're free to move from one area to another as you play, though the logistics of that might need a little bit of thinking through. The different biomes change aspects of, say, the distribution of resources, the layout of the terrain, and of course the visual style of that region. Some are grassy and lush, others wooded and dense, while in this game I started in a more semi-desert area. I won't spoil some of the progression that the game has, but I will say that there are reasons to head out into the world, apart from just looking for new minerals to drill for. So if you want to take a moment from planning out your factory, then there are other side activities that reward heading out and exploring the world, and not just staying in your comfy corner. So there is a bit of variation in the gameplay if you want it, but the vast majority of it is, of course, the factory management. And just a quick aside to say, if you are enjoying the video, please do tap the thumb up button. Helps me out with YouTube and discoverability and all stuff like that. If you tap the subscribe button right now as well, then I appreciate that too. Thank you very much. If you're coming from something like Factorio, you might be looking for one key element of that game, which is hostile local wildlife. In that game, building defenses and turning away hordes of attacking beasts is a common job. Satisfactory takes a less combative approach to factory games. That gameplay loop of defenses and turrets doesn't exist in this game. So, does it feel missing? Well, yes and no. My initial feeling was a strong yes, but the more I played, the more I wondered how that would really change the fairly safe world, approachable feel that Satisfactory currently really does enjoy. Also, Factorio is played top-down, so a bit like watching a MOBA, you have the plan view while also having the normal player view. For Satisfactory, you don't have that lofty vantage of the whole area, and so things like general awareness of threats would be much more difficult. After a number of hours in the game, I feel more and more like I don't know how well that would really fit in, and indeed the devs recently talked in a video about how they tested that idea and don't plan on including it. I'm not saying that the world is sweetness and light though. There are still nasty creatures looking to kill you if you don't defend yourself while exploring. Just don't expect packs of them to be barreling through your base. So although I find myself supportive of not having the attacking aliens gameplay we see in the likes of Factorio, I still do feel like there should be another threat in place to help layer up that bit of complexity that people might be expecting. To that end, I was wondering if temperature might be included somehow. Spawn in a cold biome, perhaps machinery wouldn't work below a certain temperature, so then the currently fairly cosmetic walls and foundations might serve to insulate them. Then perhaps adding heaters as another machine type. They need powered and of course help that factory stay operational. And the currently mainly cosmetic day-night cycle might raise and lower the ambient temperatures and make things a bit more difficult. On the nerdy side, I'm thinking about how they could do a sort of sparse voxel heat calculation tracking that could be done to take all these elements of this into account. And yes, I know, that would be a huge amount of work and is probably something really left for Satisfactory 2 or whatever comes next. But some extra spice to have experienced players contest with whilst making their factories feels like it would lift that skill ceiling a bit for those who want it. Performance is initially pretty good, and you might know that I have a pretty old system, got a 6-core i7, a 970 GPU, but as the complexity of your factory increases, the frame rate becomes a little inconsistent, I find. Out in the forests with all that dense foliage, it's actually pretty good FPS. But I'm guessing that back in the factory with all those entities linked and all the game logic that must be required to keep a track of them all moving around start to take their toll. That said, this isn't a Twitch shooter, so it doesn't really affect gameplay that much, but I'd still prefer that the frame rate would be consistent rather than high. It's that one frame microstutter while at higher FPS that feels way worse than a flat stable 60. This is a side to the game that I have seen improve during beta though. The game does feel a lot more performant than when it first launched on the Epic Store. Indeed, the game starts to aggressively swap out level of detail models when the scene gets particularly intensive. Obviously, it's trying its best to keep the frame rates up. Multiplayer works in general well in my experience, but with one caveat, and those are vehicles. The current setup is peer-to-peer, with one person acting as the server, and at this point I'd recommend saying if you're a fan of the programming side and the more technical side, the devs put up a really great post about network syncing, and it's amazing reading through how it all works. And you look at the tasks of keeping every object moving on every conveyor belt synced across players, really is amazing that it works at all, to be honest. But when using vehicles, I encountered some really odd issues. They would often bump into nothing at all, and that is like hit something invisible, and then if you didn't get off them quickly enough, you would be thrown into the air and sometimes clear off the side of the map. That's the sort of thing that's funny the first time and not so much the second time. We discovered that we could mitigate it a little bit by not driving vehicles at the same time, but that of course does take some of the fun away from the exploring side. I have had some issues with vehicles getting stuck actually in the ground when playing locally too. I'm guessing that the physics side of vehicles is having some issues at times, and then when that happens across multiplayer you run into even more problems. We did try some of the network settings in the menu, but that didn't seem to fix the issue. This is of course early access software, so bugs are expected. It might be an issue with my network situation, for example, but it is something to keep in mind. The devs at Coffee Stain Studios seem pretty open too. I mentioned a recent video where they take questions and answer them in a really open way. It does feel like a sort of indie dev rather than a big AAA lawyer and marketing checks every statement that goes out the door kind of place, which is really nice, honestly. I'm guessing that they're receptive to player feedback too, as there are a number of refinements to the game that really do smell like iteration based off player feedback. One example would be that the movement system has also a kind of slide and hop mechanic, sort of like a bit like Apex, and that isn't initially noticeable when you're playing. But what you do find is that when your factory gets larger and larger, the distances that you're running around can become a little bit of a chore. It's not sort of always suitable to go and jump on a vehicle and then drive round. So the devs want to give you an option to go faster, but they don't want to increase the run speed in just a blanket way. So why not add a small button time move, raise the skill ceiling for those players looking for a bit more speed? And honestly, it's a really nice solution for players who want it, and it doesn't affect those players who don't. This is an early access game on Steam and on the Epic Store. It is priced at £27.99 on Epic. It's 10% cheaper on Steam until the 9th of July 2020. And I also want to say that there are no microtransactions in this game. I've only ever played on Epic, so I can't comment directly about the Steam version, but I have seen that there is a system to allow peer-to-peer crossplay regardless of the platform that you purchased the game on. So, is it worth playing? Well, if you're the kind of person who would like a game based off logic, that has a whole bunch of charm that you can even play with your friends, then I'd give it an emphatic yes. It feels like a lot of game for the money. I've actually taken steps not to show you too far into the game, as I don't want to spoil it for people who decide to jump in. And what you have seen in this game is barely halfway into the main unlock tree that the game has. It isn't finished yet. There are WIP, or work-in-progress items, scattered around the biomes that currently don't do anything, for example. And also, we know that there is some story plan to the game too, but we also know that it isn't going to be something that's front and center to the experience. It'll add some lore and some background to the world. As a small aside, this game is an amazing time consumer. One of the reasons that this video is late is because I lost a number of days to this game, like pow, and another day was gone. And I'm slightly embarrassed to say that on one occasion I just completely forgot to make dinner because I didn't notice how late it was into the evening. So that's an endorsement of a sort, I guess. It feels like there's hundreds of hours of entertainment in the game if you want. Like I said, it's not even finished yet. It's how well judged so many of the facets that make up Satisfactory are that you really take away. From the animation to the graphics to the general gameplay. But even like, take an example, the notion of a beautiful planet being destroyed for fuel or taken for manufacture into commodities. It's tough not to see an environmental analogy in there somewhere. But the game never preaches to you. It never heavy-handedly rams home a message. It's like so many of the other areas of the game. It's just really well judged. I'm very interested to know what you think of Satisfactory. Have you played any Factory games before? What do you think of this new title to the genre? And if you have played, have you experienced any multiplayer problems with vehicles? Let me know your powerful thoughts and feelings by leaving a comment below right now. I'll of course be reading every single one of them. If you enjoyed the video, please do tap the thumb up button, subscribe button and the bell so you know when the next video is ready. For the people who tweet my videos, post them onto Reddit or Facebook, a big thank you. I see you, and it really is hugely appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.